let's discuss the movie Murphy's War. Welcome to Garage Geek, 100 movies, $100, and today we're discussing the movie Murphy's War. Now, the clip you just saw has two of the three main leads. And I showed that clip because it shows you some of the cinematography and gives you some idea as to what type of movie you're going to be watching. So Murphy's War is a 1971 war movie, but I would characterize it more as a revenge story. It's set in South America near the end of World War II, and that's important to the plot, that it's the end of World War II. It was directed by Peter Yates, based on a novel by Max Cato. It might be Cato, it's C-A-T-T-O, from a 1969 novel of the same name. Now let's go through some of the actors. Right, so first of all, the lead is Peter O'Toole, and he's using a heavy accent in this movie. I'm not going to go too much into Peter O'Toole because he's so famous, of course. Lawrence of Arabia, but a whole string of movies. But what I found out, Siân Phillips was his wife at the time. And Siân Phillips was recognizable to me, but she was so young. I was mostly used to seeing her as an older woman. In number one, she was in I, Claudius. She was Livia. She was Queen Cassiopeia in Clash of the Titans, the 1981 version. And she was the Reverend Mother in 1984's Dune. Now, the third principal actor in the movie is Philippe Noiret, and he was also recognizable to me. He starred in one of my favorite movies, Cinema Paradiso from 1988, and he was also in The Postman in 1994. Now, the director, Peter Yates, was a British director. According to what he wrote, British directors weren't known for making action movies, and so he didn't think he'd be able to make an action movie, but Steve McQueen wanted him. And I guess Steve McQueen was so problematic in the studio that the studio just wanted him out of their hair. And so they allowed Peter Yates to direct Steve McQueen in Bullitt. And of course, that has that extremely famous classic car chase scene. Peter Yates also directed Breaking Away in 1979, which was nominated for 5 Academy Awards, including Best Director and Best Film. So let's briefly talk about the novelist Max Cato. So he wrote many, many action novels, and 10 of them were made into movies. Now, the novel has a very different ending, and it actually sounds more interesting. The characters are also very different in subtle ways, which I think would have made the movie a bit more interesting. For example, the Philippe Noiret character is a deserter from the French military, and he feels like he has something to prove. Frank Sinatra was originally supposed to play the lead in this movie. It was a grueling on-location shoot that broke the relationship between the director and the producer. I want to read a quote that Peter O'Toole stated about this movie. "I used to do all my own stunts when I first started. I made it a principle. Everything in Lawrence of Arabia I did myself, but after suffering a paralyzed hand, a bad back, broken ankle, and countless knocks, I decided never again. It was stupid. Films employ stuntmen for a reason. They can do these things far better than I. I refuse to do any more stunts. Then I thought, well, just one more time. So I talked myself into it. In Venezuela, I even fly a seaplane. If you want to see a picture of sheer terror, have a look at the shots of me when I first fly that seaplane." The movie was not successful at the box office, and what the critics have to say about this movie is pretty interesting. I'm going to read a couple. For example, Gene Siskel called it an adventure story, high in production values, but low in suspense. Charles Champlin of the Los Angeles Times wrote, "The story proceeds from the detestable to the improbable by way of the uninteresting." So before we go on, let's go ahead and watch a clip where I think the movie shines. What it tries to do is show war-like events in real time. Now, this is going to help and hurt the movie, because one of the things I think that is really interesting about this movie is that it will show actions happening in real time without jump cuts. Now, this will off-put many modern audiences because we are so used to now these action scenes being so speedy, but this movie slows it down to real time. And as you just saw, I think that scene where the Germans are coming up on the village and then they go through the village and it's happening in real time, it doesn't jump. To make it shorter, I think it actually builds suspense. But later in the movie, there's going to be a problem because so many of the action sequences are really, really drawn out. And I think that this would have been a tighter action movie had a lot of those scenes just been trimmed. This leads us to the third clip that I'm going to show. And I'm trying not to show spoilers, but unfortunately, if you look closely at this scene, you're going to see some of the major elements that are important for the ending. Noiret character, he has a change of conscience. I won't go into why, and he decides to walk away. He ends up deserting Murphy, but not for reasons of cowardice. So let me read this quote from the director, Yates. He said that he was interested in, quote, the way in which three people, and I'm jumping ahead in the quote, are really brought together by circumstance and how each character plays on the other and makes them do things that they wish they hadn't and things they sometimes feel proud of. And I don't think the director was successful in bringing this idea across. I've already talked about some of the negative aspects of the movie. For example, the slow pacing in the action scenes. For example, the middle of the movie really drags. However, is this movie worth watching? Now, I'm going to say yes, but again, it's with a caveat. The director does a lot of interesting things, like show us wartime scenes in real time, so that you would if you were actually in one of those situations, you would see in real time how they would play out. So in that sense, it seems and feels more realistic. So that is something that the director does really well. But on the other hand, modern audiences might not want to sit through extended, drawn-out action scenes. I actually enjoyed the acting. Some of the critics said that it was hammy and over the top. I didn't have a problem with it. I thought the three leads were really interesting. I thought they worked well together, especially like Siân Phillips and Philippe Noiret in their supporting roles. They were both very interesting characters. So would I recommend this movie? I would only recommend it to certain people. I would not recommend it across the board. Overall, even though it has its strengths, I would say that this is an average movie, but I feel that this movie has its redeeming qualities. So if you've enjoyed this movie review, the second in my series of 100 movies, $100, then please make sure to watch my other videos in this series. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Thank you so much for your support.